Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle video commentary number 21. We have, today is the 9th of November, and again, it will not be a long program because Tuya and I are preparing further for the vigil for the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland. Well, as you know, maybe you know, we can throw away program 20 per se. I changed all that to 20.1 so I could do more and better, because I had trouble with a very short program 20. But making a little bit of a segue, I likened the world of energies, which DK talks about, to the description of Shambhala, which DK talks about when we do our new moon work. Streams of directed force and its centers of concentrated light. And then he says something very important. He says the subjective realm is vitally more real than is the objective, once it is entered and known. Now, there are just so many people that have never experienced it, and as far as they are concerned, it's a waste of time to even talk about its existence, yet alone to somehow enter it and have the experiences related to the subjective realm. But it's filled with visions and possibilities that the, according to Master Decay, that the mental clairvoyant can witness, the geometrical patterns of thought, or he can also see, of course, the constraining, confining, misleading glamours. So therefore the illusions, he uses that word, of course, still with relation to glamour, or maybe we could call them delusions, but the illusions and, well, he does, and delusions of the astral world. So we can believe the Master and say yes, when we can enter the subjective realm, it's going to be ever so much more real to us, and more vital and more important than our connections with the normal solar etheric physical plane. And we can't even really predictably, at least not all can, view the etheric plane, but we certainly can view the outer dense plane, which is the plane upon which an aspect of the plan has to be materialized, definitely materialized or concretized, um, and we think of it as real, but no, it's not really. It's extremely illusory, but necessary in our work with the plan to change the configuration of this outer plane. DK says further, it is simply, how simple to some and how insuperably difficult to others apparently, a question of acceptance. First of all, of its existence, that is, may I interpolate, the existence of the subjective world, and going on with DK, the development of a mechanism of contact which may, I interpolate, DK has developed, we tend to see, to an extraordinary degree, development of a mechanism of contact, the Tibetan says, and the cultivation of the ability to use this mechanism at will. I'll interpolate and say, yes, he does that when he is examining his groups and the individuals within the groups to write those letters which have been of such value to readers like ourselves. Of course, the more we know about the person to whom he is writing, the more sense it makes to understand and see the appositeness of what he writes. These were people, well, they still exist, of course, not in the same incarnation, but these were people just very much like ourselves who took up his invitation to come and work with him. Because we can ask, if he invited us to do the same in the future, what would our response be? So, does it exist? Shall we develop it? Can we then, once it is developed, use the mechanism of contact with the subjective worlds? Can we use it at will and effectively? And then, once we have made that contact and the contact, this subjective world at will inspired interpretation follow. For him, of course, it does. For us, we might simply be so amazed at what we see that temporarily at least we forget the purpose of the contact. Well, that was our little segue as we venture into program number 22. Rather, 21. So we're talking about now the I suppose the goal of the subjective world in the evolutionary life process, I don't think we'll, in this short program, reach page 58. We're dealing with three great sciences overall: the science of impression, the science or technique of invocation and evocation, and above all, the great or supreme science of contact. If we were to come all the way down here, we'll be getting ready for the next section, which is section 9, expanding areas of conscious interaction. And I wonder if we can realize the extraordinary material that is being sent to us, or that he prepared maybe, 80 something, almost 90, maybe almost 90 years ago. First of all, to have respect. So many people say, well, look, that was written such a long time ago. Surely it has been superseded. And what do they say? Superseded it? A lot of channeled garbage in a very reachable place on the bookshelves, with many people following such expressions as if they were real, and the authentic communications of the hierarchy are neglected. You either have to, I remember I was in the Theosophical Society, and in those days, 50 years ago, except for closet readers at night, the Theosophists were not so eager to read Alice Bailey, because they figured, well, there's nothing to it. Just another person receiving some kind of communication of little value. I had to stretch to find those books, or maybe bend over and hurt my back, I don't know. But they were not in an accessible place in the Alcott Library. Of course, that was a very impressive library, and to me, at the time, I knew nothing about this kind of competition or contest or disagreement between the followers of Bailey and the followers of Theosophy, mostly induced by the followers of Theosophy. I had just taken a very long trip to see a Masonic opera called The Magic Flute in Mozart, and a librettist back, I suppose, in the late 18th century. His name was Schikaneder, and they managed to include in this wonderful opera so many practices that were common in the Egyptian mystery schools. So it was deeply thought-provoking. Um, it was about the natural man versus the true disciple becoming an initiate. So all of that was fresh in my mind, and it did not strike me how the producers of such excellent material as The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, etc., could be somehow challenging the value or rectitude of what Alice Bailey was bringing through. But you know, people like to fight about orthodox issues whose stream of information is real and whose is false. Well, I do know, however, quite a few. I knew the members of the Theosophical Lodge in Boston, and they found no trouble incorporating Alice Bailey because they could see immediately with such writings as A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which is the psychological key to Madame Blavatsky's magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, that they were of great and similar value. Blavatsky had served, we may remember, as an amanuensis for the Tibetan, done in a different way than with Bailey, and more along an historical line. And then came Bailey more along the second ray line. And what are we to predict? Will the Tibetan choose in just a few years an amanuensis along the first ray line, perhaps, when he chooses to write his next series of bridging treatises? So that's just filling in a little bit with a little bit of experience. But now let's go on, at least a little ways, into this new subsection. As I say, it looks like it's the goal of the subjective worlds in the evolutionary life process. So DK says, it might be said that consciousness itself, which is the goal on this planet of all the evolutionary process, and why is that, may I interpolate? This planet has a ray 2 soul, and the second aspect is correlated with consciousness, and it's in a phase of its development when it is destined one day to take the second cosmic initiation, so perhaps those are the reasons. But anyway, the goal of all on this planet, of all the evolutionary process, says DK, and then he goes on, consciousness itself is simply the demonstrated result of the science of contact. Remember, he's been calling it the supreme science of contact, and he's been talking about what lies beneath it in a supportive manner. And the last few programs have dealt with that. So I just have to say, if you want to read and think with continuity, then it will be easier to absorb what DK is saying, and hopefully to read with a profoundly studential approach, so that it's not just once over lightly. So here, and in the solar system, in this phase of the solar system's development, we are developing the consciousness aspect. The solar system, of course, is a kind of, or the solar logos is a kind of macrocosm to all the planets. And what is true of it is also true of those beings, planetary beings, included within the solar systemic process. Okay, what else does Master DK say? As I've said before, it seems like I could spend my whole life on a book like this and still be extracting that which is of value. And of course, if we can afford the time and have the will, as we read the other books, we can relate what we find in all of them to each other, because Master DK's books are interdependent, like one great sphere of knowledge. So going on with what DK says, this consciousness itself is the goal of the entire evolutionary process. It is likewise the goal in some form or other, and at some stage or other, of all planetary existences within the solar system itself. Now, that is what I basically just said. Every one of those deities we call a planetary deity reaches a point when the development of consciousness is the main process toward which they have to attend. And, in a way, this development is very connected with the sense of touch, so that one can understand through this subtle touch the quality of that which is touched, and can become more and more sensitive to touching other entities and emanations and strata and points of tension ever more elevated, they begin to really mean something to us instead of just, well, uh, intellectual thoughts which present an interesting possibility. They actually um, become part of our experience. Now, DK goes on. The unfoldment of this conscious response is, in reality, the growth of the sensitive awareness of the planetary logos himself. So it's as if the human being, um, the human beings are extensions of the planetary logos, and as they become, uh, that is, human beings, ever more sensitive, the what's really happening here is that the planetary logos is growing in its or his sensitive awareness through his appendages, which are human beings. Now, going on with DK, the human mechanism and its ability to respond to its environment, as science well knows, has been developed in response to an inner urge present in every human being and in all forms of life. That means the other kingdoms as well, right? The other living kingdoms, I guess they all live in some respect, and going on with DK, and to pull the magnetic effect um, of the surrounding environment. So, sensitivity, let's sum it up, is part of an inner urge. So it's responding to the attraction, the pull, um, and magnetic effect of the surrounding environment. And may I say, it has taken a long time. Just imagine the degree of sensitivity, or not, of early animal man compared with the kind of sensitivity we now have. Of course, this doesn't mean that throughout history there were not seekers and seers who had great sensitivity. Um, the modern prejudice is that humanity is now as intelligent and as sensitive as it has ever been. But that simply is not true. Humanity is not sensitive uh, today uh, in that way um, as some of the sages of old have been. Yeah, I had a little thing I had to take care of. So, an inner urge present within human every human being is responding to the pull and magnetic effect of the environment, the pull and magnetic effect of the surrounding environment. Well, basically, that is what the word environment means, surroundings. But, of course, as we're learning by being students of occultism, there's much more to the environment than the obvious, detected by the five senses, and more to the environment than that which is detected by the astral vehicle, or even the lower mental vehicle, or the higher mental vehicle, or even by what we normally call the soul. And on it goes. Always there is more to respond to. We do not imagine that the response range and depth of a planetary logos, for instance, is limited to the response and range of a human being. And we do not imagine that the response range and depth of the consciousness of a solar logos is limited to that of a planetary logos. So we have an ever expanding picture here of what points of tension can be detected and responded to as one works with this supreme science of contact. Okay, DK goes on, step by step, the forms of life upon the physical plane, down through the ages, have unfolded one sense after another. Okay. One form of sensitive response after another becomes possible as the mechanism is produced until the human being can receive impressions from the physical plane and rightly interpret them, can respond to the emotional contacts of the astral plane and succumb to them or surmount them. Let's just say, and I've elaborated on this in my video book on the egoic lotus, when the human being is concentrating upon and opening the first petal of the egoic lotus, which now nearly all have opened, and maybe all to some extent, emotional sensitivity is not the theme. It has much more to do with viability, with survival in the world, rather than that next and sensitive response, which brings in many things that you can study in the book, uh, video book, if you like. So, over the ages, down through the ages, as DK has said, the forms have unfolded and become more sensitive. And as I said, or DK says, until the human being can receive impressions from the physical plane, which, also can grow in their acuity. It may not be a high plane when thinking relatively, but one can certainly uh, respond to it in a manner more or less sensitive. Um, so those impressions can be rightly interpreted. Um, and DK goes on about the human being's growth in sensitivity, can respond to the emotional contacts of the astral plane and succumb to them, may I interpolate, as so many millions and even billions of people do, even at this time. So DK says, respond and succumb to them, or surmount them, may I interpolate, as the initiates and disciples do. And he goes on, and can become telepathic to the world of the mental plane, thus sharing physically, emotionally, and mentally in the life and contacts of the three worlds. Not just the outer world, right? Sharing in the life and contacts of the three worlds, which constitute his environment, at least present environment, may I add, and, says DK, and in which he is submerged during incarnation. Okay. So we get a picture of constant growth in response ability, response ability. So much can be learned by that combination of words and bringing it together as responsibility. So more and more, the impressions of these different levels of the personality become meaningful to the individual until he begins, at the end of this particular phase, to become telepathic to the world of the mental plane. Of course, that's not the end, not by any means. Thus, sharing physically, emotionally, and mentally in the life and contacts of the three worlds which constitute his environment, may I add, his present environment, and in which he is submerged, as DK says, whilst in incarnation. It's been a long process, and perhaps one day the reading of the record will reveal to us the many turns and developments of that process. I wonder whether we will be seeing every life or incarnation, or only the really significant ones. But we'll be seeing and understanding enough to know how the process of responsiveness and sensitization developed within us. We certainly don't want to be limited, as so many are, by the sense of simply one incarnation that you live through and then gone forever. That would be a huge limitation and would dictate certain disadvantageous behaviors in which ordinary, non-aspiring man indulges. We really need a greater vista to be presented to a more believing and accepting human race. Now, their education, at least of the kind that we hope we can offer, will play its part. What DK goes on here? What he, the man, what he gets out of this life of constant impression is largely dependent upon his power to invoke his environment and draw from it in evocative response what he needs in all the various departments of his being. And that's the whole thing, may I add. A man has far more numerous departments of being than I'm not sure if I can get this correct. Sometimes I just miss. What he needs. What are the departments of a man's being? Well, it certainly goes, these departments go beyond the personality vehicles and the personality as a whole. They include the egoic lotus or causal body. They include all the aspects of the spiritual triad. Eventually, they include the monad, and also the liberated monad one day of the seventh degree, ascended Chohan, such as the Christ and the Buddha are, working on the completion of that seventh degree, which seems to take quite a long time. Now, the average individual, well, what you see is what you get. Um, the personality, which is of immediate experience, seems like all there is to the man, at least to his assessment. And he thinks that those who think of additional departments of being are simply making it up, are dealing with factors which are fanciful, not really existent. But as I say, that will change as people like ourselves who maybe know a little bit, know because perhaps we've thought it through, or certainly because we've been told what we can think through, um, have arrived at different and more expansive uh, conclusions. So he's able to invoke and to draw from his environment um, an evocation, a response. He's able to do that. Hmm. And the process is progressive. When he can make his or set up a system in which his environment, to a certain extent, will respond to his invocation, then that ability, which I think DK here calls this, brings about other effects. This, in turn, says DK, forces him, whether he likes it or not, to produce an effect upon other people. This can be far more potent for good or evil, and from the telepathic angle, than he likes to think or conceive. You just might say, well, these are just my thoughts and the thoughts of those with whom I am grouped. What harm can they be? But we've seen in the period of history evil groups inspired by evil um, magicians and savants on the inner side wreak tremendous havoc in the world. And of course, just contrast. Think of it for a moment. Here is Hitler and his evil gang, as the Tibetan called it, unable to work with the love nature, at least true love. And here is the great teacher, the Christ, um, teaching 12 disciples um, who become, in a sense, a model of his ashram. Now, is there any comparison? Christ and his disciples or apostles went about the world doing good, ameliorating the pain of living for so many. Hitler and his evil gang brought catastrophe, notice the word astral in there, brought catastrophe to the world. And finally, to the place from which it all emanated, Germany. I guess it was a great karmic example. What you sow, you shall reap. Well, anyway, going on with DK, you see, therefore, how these sciences of impression, of invocation and evocation, and of telepathy are naturally concerned with what is inherent in man and in his relation to his environment and circumstances, all interdependent and all part of the supreme science of contact. Yeah, the Tibetan is actually doing a lot to link up the very things that he has written. In a feeble manner, I try to do something similar, but he's holding his entire teaching in his mind at will when he wishes to, and he knows exactly the links of any part of his teaching to any other. Students like you and like myself, we have to see if we can find those links, since they are not ready to be used at will as DK can do. Okay, so DK goes on and says something quite interesting. The germ or embryonic capacity for all types of planetary contact is inherent in every man. and will not be frustrated in the long run. Um, we have to realize, I'll interpolate, that we don't necessarily stay with this planet forever. There are other planetary schools leading to stellar schools. I mean, for instance, let's say we go to transitional school on Jupiter. If we are to be transferred to the star Betelgeuse, and maybe if we're among the those who will be transferred to Sirius when the way of the higher evolution is trodden, Venus would be our planet of instruction still in this solar system. There are all these links, and we will learn eventually, as the Christ and the Buddha pretty well know, what's to be found on the logoic plane in the monadic realm, where thus far we cannot venture. So all kinds, all types of planetary contacts are inherent in man. So the future is bright for every emanation in this particular universe. Such emanations have descended, but they will return. It appears along the line of their descent, they will return along the same line. So, temporarily, there may be frustration at the ceilings, the kind of preventions from going further, but they will not last. So DK goes on to say, in this knowledge of goals already achieved, may I add, look what's happened with Animal Man and where he now stands, and how many more petals are open to him as he is now than were when he emerged into the fourth kingdom. In this knowledge of goals already achieved in the three worlds lies the guarantee of the achievement in the more subjective worlds which are present within the aspirant's surroundings, but to which he remains as yet unawakened and unenlightened. This, then, is a very important statement. Okay. A little bit of wheezing can go a long way here. But what we have is the idea that the past is the prologue to the future. And what stands out for me here is the idea of the guarantee of achievement in the more subjective worlds, which are at present inaccessible to us, at least at our present stage of development. But look, we're still in training, and a lot of training is going to be given from 2025 onward, um, toward the true astronomical beginning of the Aquarian Age. So there will be knowledge of a higher kind in the Aquarian Age, and we will know the nature of the different strata of subjectivity, as now we cannot know those strata. We are, as DK says here, unawakened and unenlightened. But light will reveal. And I suppose we will have that experience of waking up to factors which have always been there, not even there, but here, and to be surprised accordingly. And DK says, I'm seeking to make the matter as simple as I can. Well, good luck. I find this to be a difficult book. Well, just like I find Letters on Occult Meditation to be, in many ways, a difficult book. I don't have to wait to get into a treatise on cosmic fire to find the difficulty, the complexity, the depth of what Master DK has written elsewhere. I don't have to say that the only deep book, because it evades understanding by all those who do not have the initiate consciousness, that's the only such book. The further you go, the deeper it gets, and the more you notice what you have overlooked in earlier readings. So he's seeking to make the matter as simple as he can for much of the abstract formulations of the occult sciences and the academic psychologists are incident to the overactivity of men's minds and emotional natures. Yes, when we have a mind that is racing about from here to there, and the astral body which is reacting, not so much responding, but reacting to every emotional current, then the clarifying simplicity that we need disappears. Now, even so, the matter is difficult. But to DK, it looks just like the ABC. So, he goes on, if you can grasp certain broad and relatively simple facts, and you recognize that you possess the key or the clue in your already developed capacities, then you will go forward with simplicity. I'll interpolate that Master Moria puts a question to us, would you rather simplify or complexify, complicate? And of course he chooses simplicity as desirable. So then you will go forward with simplicity, making no undue intellectual difficulties when dealing with these more subtle phases of your ever-existent environment. It is, in the last analysis, just a question as to what impresses you at any moment, and then in what manner it conditions you. So that's kind of a boil down of what the whole process really means. And you know, there are times when we really do want to have the simplicity as much as may be possible. So he tries to make us appreciate that the real issue is what impresses us at any given moment and in what manner it conditions you. Okay, friends, well, I think I've got a program coming up. This is page 56. That's what we did. Just a few pages, and beginning with 54. And it is program number 21. Tuya just came in and said, would you mind doing the program coming up? Well, I haven't got things set up the way she does, with the proper music and all, but I'll do my best, and this has taken us from 54 to 56, and our next program will be number 22 on the XX of November, and we'll be beginning at page 56. So she and I want to wish you successful assimilation, and all of us on the communications team, BL and Joe and Mikhail and Harold and Olivia um, and Frederick helping quite often, and others helping at the time of the conference. We wish you success in absorbing what is said. At least what is said is what DK has written. Whether you find any value in what I may add to it, helping to make links, and if the links are properly made, then maybe light will flash forth. Okay, I've got to run, and we'll be talking to you soon. Bye for now, lots of love, and we'll be in touch.